All right, welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome to the 2025 Teach Access Student Academy. I'm Mindy Colin. I'm the Director of Development and Industry Partnerships. I'd like to start by thanking our sponsors for helping to make this event free. Our presenting sponsor, Merck, who is doing this session right now, in addition to our other sponsors, Verizon, Microsoft, Google, Meta, and Salesforce. For those who might just be joining us, welcome to the Teach Access Student Academy. We're excited that you're spending time with us to learn about disability and accessibility. This is our second to last session for the Teach Access Student Academy. Before we start, I want to make sure you know of a few key items. The chat is currently turned off. However, the Q&A feature is on. So if you have questions throughout the presentation, you can drop them in the Q&A section. If you have any needs, you can send a message through the chat to the hosts and the panelists. We have captions provided by a live captioner. So to access those, you can click the CC icon at the bottom of the menu bar. To view the ASL interpreters, find the interpretation button at the bottom menu bar with an icon that looks like a globe. Click that and select American Sign Language, and a new window will pop up that you can move around your screen for preferred viewing. Feel free to use the Q&A feature to send questions during the session. If you have any other questions, concerns, or accommodation needs during the session, use the chat feature and send the hosts a message. We are recording this session. With that, I would like to introduce Dr. Stephen Framil, Corporate Global Head of Accessibility from Merck, who is going to talk to you about Digital Accessibility 101. And with that, Steve, I turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Mindy, and it's a pleasure to join all of you on this Friday afternoon. So we're all looking forward to the weekend here. As mentioned, I'm Dr. Stephen Framil, Corporate Global Head of Accessibility at Merck. Also, I am co-lead of our Global Disability Inclusion Strategy Council, and this is an internally facing organization at Merck where we're looking to advance a disability confident workforce. So this afternoon, we're going to take a look here at Digital Accessibility 101, just to kind of give you what to expect in terms of what we're going to talk about, in terms of the definition, why is this important, what does this mean, and how can it be done? And then we'll kind of wrap it up and hopefully have some time for some questions at the end. So that being said, I found it's very important when you're talking about accessibility that you define what it is exactly, because it really can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I've given talks for different types of audiences, whether they're in the cybersecurity space or in the clinical trial space or just in the manufacturing, generally, shop floor. And it really can mean a lot of different things. So for the next few minutes, we're going to define what at least digital accessibility is and what it means actually at Merck. And so it is the practice of designing and developing software user interface so that people with disabilities can effectively understand, interact, and respond meaningfully with the digital content, whether by their own means or with the aid of assistive technologies. And we have recently included, this practice includes the use of plain language, translations, and inclusive design principles. And so that's the broad definition that at least we at Merck use today in how we do our business. I'm sure many of you have seen this, but this is always something, if you're talking to new stakeholders, or whether it's senior management or whether they're folks in your peer organization, all organizations like to use acronyms. And so it kind of makes them feel very special. And so you can introduce this to them. I'm sure you're aware of it, A11Y, the numeratum with the 11 letters, 11 representing the 11 letters between A and Y. And so that's kind of a little shortcut. So we've used this at Merck, just as it's used across the accessibility community. Additionally, at Merck, when we started doing this a few years back, we needed to kind of, when we were creating our policy, we really thought, okay, let's sort of brand with an illustration what this is actually going to be. And so you may have been seeing this little icon up on the left in the header there, but we've got this illustration that we've used for accessibility and really kind of depicting it so that when folks see it internally within the company, they'll recognize it. Okay, that's our accessibility program. And of course, we have different instances of it. And because Merck is a global company, you want to make sure that you're representing the globe in all aspects of the globe. So you can see there on the right, it represents Asia Pacific region, and there on the left, North America and Europe. So definition, any sort of acronyms that you want to bring people into the know, and then brand your effort. Now, let's get to the why. This has, of course, been an interesting topic over the last few weeks, and really some sort of, what does this really mean at the heart of it? And so we're going to talk about today what digital accessibility is. And really, we're going to focus on disability inclusion. I think that is something that is relatable across any spectrum, the relatability of disabilities. We're going to talk a little bit about the basic business aspects of it, as well as the human rights and then the lived experiences. Again, this is a 101 class on how you can begin to think about approaching stakeholders in any organization in wanting to build an accessibility program. Now, of course, we just had a recent study done last September with the 2024 Global Economics of Disability. And out of that study, which was a refresh from, I believe, 2020, 1.58 billion persons with disabilities, with 2.9 billion caregivers, families, and friends around them, representing over 18 trillion in disposable income. And so when you talk about the business value of having digital accessibility, creating things for the disability community, this is something that you can certainly make a good business case, whether it's 20 to 25% of the global population. It's certainly something that should be understood from a business case. Also, when it comes to security, privacy, cybersecurity, and this represents from IBM. Last year, they had their 2024 data breach report. And I have some metrics specific for healthcare and pharma, because that's what I'm in. But when you think about it, data breaches really are often a matter of human risk factors. And when you design for accessibility, you're designing just a better product in general, and thereby getting out in front of those potential cybersecurity risks because it's so often human error. And so in the healthcare, per breach, 9.77 million, and the pharmaceutical, 5.10 million. So this is something from a business sense, from a security sense, it's important that we design for accessibility and use it. And of course, you can always look to your company's values, the leadership, the legacy. And at George Merck, we have this quote where he's saying that we try to never forget that medicine is for the people. It's not for the profits. And so it's really kind of tying to the values of your company. And I think that's something that you can, regardless of the, whatever's happening in the world at the moment, you can tie directly to the business case, to the security case, and also to your company values. And of course, when you're thinking about just human rights and the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, Article 9, where people with disabilities being able to live independently and participate fully in all aspects of life. You can really, when you're talking to your stakeholders, making the case, you can really point to the United Nations and the human rights aspect of it. And of course, there are lots of laws and legislation globally that are coming into place. Some countries have very prescriptive laws, and some that are perhaps now more focused on the public sector. But I think what we're moving is ultimately into the private sector. And of course, I'm sure it's been mentioned on the last couple of days here with the European Accessibility Act really impacting all of the 27 member states of the European Union. And so really, this is where we're talking about really making accessibility available for everyone. And really being able to draw on icons such as Stevie Wonder, being able to make the case to your business stakeholders. Also, it's important, I mentioned relatability of disabilities. And I think it's important that your stakeholders understand that there's all types of disabilities and make sure that they're aware of that. Certainly, they can be aware of the things that are permanent, the permanent disabilities. But also, there are temporary disabilities, which many of your stakeholders can often be relate to. And of course, there are situational disabilities. I'm sure there are many parents out there, and they can be able to relate to this particular image as well of a parent holding a child, feeding with a bottle, and also working at the computer and cooking it all at the same time. And so these are the things that can really make disabilities um, uh, relatable to everyone. And of course, the invisible disabilities, the things that we don't see, the chronic pain, diabetes, learning disabilities, mental health conditions, and so on. It's really about the entire lived experience. Having a disability, whether you may have been born with it, or you had a life event, or were simply aging into it, it is the full lived experience. And so when you're making the case to your stakeholders about why you should have an accessibility program, I would really, at least in the current time, focus on the relatability of disabilities, because it really impacts all of us, whether we're ready for it or whether it just happens. Oftentimes we can get sick, and the therapies that we're taking can cause disabilities, whether they be situational, or sometimes those therapies can cause permanent disabilities. And so this is something where it's really important to make the business case, draw lines to the basic human rights of it, and then make sure that it's relatable in the full range of disabilities. Make it relatable to your stakeholders. Okay, so that's kind of the why. We're going to now move to the what. What are we actually talking about? And so whatever industry you happen to be in, we're very much in a digital age, that's for sure. And there are various digital touch points that any one of us are going to have in our business. And so this is where you really describe the picture of information communication technologies to your stakeholders. What does that mean? Your websites, your mobile apps, multimedia, electronic documents, all of this, I'm sure you're very well aware. So what does that mean? I'll give an example of what that actually means in the pharma space. In pharma, basically we have, and I've very much simplified this, we basically have research, we have manufacturing, we have engagement with patients and consumers, and then we have our ways of working within the company. And this is the entire digital ecosystem. And so in research, we really have the preclinical, we have the lab software. And of course, within clinical trials, you have a lot of digital touch points, not only operating clinical trials, but also with patients. Patients by their very virtue have comorbidities, frailties, and disabilities. And so this is something where it's very important that in the clinical trial space, for example, that we're creating accessible digital experiences. When it comes to manufacturing, how we're the medicines that we are, we've invented them, we've got them approved, and now we have to produce them. And so everything that happens on the shop floor with the workers, talking about digital work instructions and root cause analysis, all of this is part of the ecosystem. When we think about actually engaging with a patient, we have digital health solutions, personalized drug delivery systems, vaccine management, and basic customer engagement, whether it be web, video, telehealth, or even patient portals. And of course, like any company, you're going to have the ways of working, the software, things that you're using to conduct your business. And so it's a very vast landscape. And so when you're talking with your stakeholders, like, well, what does this actually mean? It's really that end-to-end life cycle of your business, whatever it happens to be. So you've mentioned, why is this important and what does this apply to? Now, how can we actually do this? And so at Merck, we really took the approach of having a cross-organizational approach to this. When we wrote our policy, it was a cross-organizational team that was able to weigh in and provide their perspective from whatever global support function or part of the business that they were in, be able to provide that perspective. Now, make no mistake, oftentimes you have just a blank screen when you're starting out. And that's exactly what we had at Merck. In fact, I use this slide in my presentations very often. It's really where you have a blank screen. So we think about, where does your thought leadership come from? The why. And so at Merck, this is where our thought leadership comes from our Chief Diversity Office. In fact, our policy owner for accessibility, digital accessibility, is our Chief Diversity Officer. So the thought leadership, the inspiration comes from there. But of course, we have to partner with the IT organization in order to enable the thought leadership, thereby empowering the business, who ultimately own the digital portfolio, empowering the business to advance accessibility within their respective digital assets. Okay, so the policy landscape. I talked about the policy, how we created one. Very important that if every company has its policies, how it operates, and you want to first and foremost, as much as possible, anchor to the top level corporate policies. You don't want to have a policy that kind of sits by itself. It's not really tied to anything. You want to anchor it to your top level policies. You want to make it global in mandate, or if you're a national company, it's across all states. But the breadth of the company operations, if you break it down and you only have it applied to some parts of the business, that's going to be really hard to implement, even for those parts of the business that have been designated as in scope. So go global. Top line, anchor to the top line corporate policies, and go global. Of course, you can't get tremendously specific within your global policy. And so this is where you're going to have SOPs and work instructions around different aspects of implementing and governing and supporting the policy, whether it be your system of record, whether it be for remediation and implementation. Maybe it's really detailing design systems, and how are you going to test and assess your digital assets. So there's plenty of room. It's like a pyramid in terms of where it's coming from the top, make it global, and then have as many SOPs and work instructions to really provide that detail. At Merck, we do that exactly. We've got 2 SOPs currently, and underneath an array of job aids that are really channel specific. For email direct marketing, here's some direct instruction. For captioning for web videos, here's some direct instruction. And so that's how we've structured it. So now you've got your policy, global policy, your SOPs are in place, but then you can't just walk away. You have to have some sort of people structure in order for it to continue to happen. And so this is where from your leadership, once you've gotten your stakeholder buy-in from leadership, you've given them why is this important, you've given what are we applying this to, you've got a policy, then you really need, as much as possible, senior executive sponsorship to really provide that overarching strategy, that sponsorship, and then, of course, communications. So that's one level of your governance, as it were. But of course, your steering committee is not going to actually be doing a lot of the heavy lifting, and so this is where a leadership team that is cross-organizational from different parts of your business can really bring their perspective into what it is that you're doing. Additionally, you need a steward network within every little subdivision of the company. So, for example, at Merck, we operate in many, many countries across the world, and today we have an accessibility steward network, at least one in every country that we have offices, and they're the champions. They are the boots on the ground that are really working with the local business owners and job owners of digital assets, working with them to advance accessibility within their digital portfolio. And so we have this 3 layers, as it were, of people. Got people, of course, you need to make sure that you've got some technology to support that. And so we do have a system of record, a tool that we can track and manage accessibility across the company digital landscape. And then additionally, we also have begun to put this into our processes to have some sort of accountability, some sort of mechanism where business owners and job owners of the digital assets have some sort of accountability. And so this governance model, which we have today at Merck, represents the people with the steering committee, the action committee or leadership team, our champion steward network, a system of record, and a way to be accountable for it. So that's a governance model. Many ways to do that, but that's the way that we are currently doing it. Going forward, you have governance, but then you really have to have some sort of communication plan, not just emails, newsletters, or intranet postings and articles, but you can have internal webcasts. You can feature guest keynote speakers. You can have business unit forums, internal workshops and summits and therefore. So a communication plan that really can bring to life what the policy is, and you can really do that through the people that you have with your leadership team, with your steering committee, with your steward network. You also have to have training, of course, training in your learning management system. Of course, you have to have awareness training, get the fundamentals, and if you're able to get accessibility into any company-wide or enterprise-wide mandatory training, that is the best way to get that broad awareness. But of course, you have to go deeper. You need role-based training for specific roles who are folks who are actually working with digital assets, your designers, your developers, your testers, your content authors, even legal, even procurement, everything is involved. And of course, when you're doing this, you always want to have a strategy on how the training gets assigned, how it gets tracked and managed, all of that. And then, so you have communication and training, and all of that ultimately drives the change and the change management across your organization. Whether it's going to be, driving the change to do testing and remediation, you also want to be proactive when it comes to creating design systems and style guides and so forth. And at Merck, ultimately, it is the business owner of the digital asset who is ultimately responsible for ensuring accessibility within their digital portfolio, rolling it into the cost of doing business. And so this is where all of these aspects of the governance model with work streams of communication, training, and change really help drive that implementation across the organization. So you've got some work streams, you've got some governance models. Now, you really have to kind of paint a picture. Where are we all going with this? And this is one of the things that I found was the most successful thing that we did back shortly after we published the policy in 2021. We created a roadmap, multi-year roadmap, to kind of give people like, here's the direction, here's where we want to go, where we want to be in 5 years, and here's the prioritization based off different work streams, and here are the milestones. And this really gives them time to absorb it, digest it, and to be able to start to plan for it. That's the big thing, having time to plan for it. And of course, part of the, when we talked about how are we doing this, we have to have specific standards that of course ties to the policy, but you don't have to necessarily recreate the wheel. This is really all part of user-centered design when it comes to useful and usable and findable and credible, desirable, and accessible. And so this is part of a broader depth of knowledge when it comes to design. And of course, we do have the web content accessibility guidelines that we point to in our policy, just like many other companies, many other countries. We use WCAG 2.2. And of course, those are very, very detailed and they are very complicated. So what do we do about that? Actually, at Merck, we use WCAG 2.2 AA, but we've also transposed it into more understandable, more digestible to your business stakeholder, 8 inclusive design principles, where we're allowing the user to have preference, allowing the user to stay in control, doing no harm, properly structuring your elements, and so forth. And so this is part of one of the job aids actually we created underneath our policy. And of course, we're always wanting to ship left. I'm sure you know this concept very well. And this is something that we're doing today with our style guides, our master brands, our design systems, so that anything that is created downstream has at least a baseline for accessibility. Supplier management. Actually, I was very much involved in the building of the Procure Access uh, uh, building blocks sponsored by Disability In. And really, you want to get this in as soon as you can, because most often you're going to not be building all your software, you're going to be buying it. And so you want to make sure that you have mechanisms in place so that your suppliers, your vendors are delivering accessible digital products and services. So getting it into your supplier management, getting it into your design systems, also getting it into your actual processes for your technology, your digital systems development lifecycle. And this is something that we've done where we actually have controls, accessibility controls throughout the lifecycle for our digital assets, making sure that we are testing, making sure that we're doing design evaluations. And as something is in the run and operate phase and you're making updates, making sure that any update is also accessible. So making it part of the processes that you do. It's really around the people, process, technology, the people being your steering committee, leadership team, and a steward network. Your technology can be, of course, this platform system of record, and then getting into your process of SDLC, into the process of procurement, and so on. And of course, really make sure that your stakeholders understand the role of AI. I think we all know that this is an opportunity for AI to really help people with disabilities represent their true, authentic self outside of the barriers and inequities of the physical world. But of course, we always want to make sure that we keep the human in the loop when we're doing all of this, especially people with disabilities. I mentioned the technology, the system of record, something that you're able to do some automated testing, do some manual evaluations that has remediation suggestions and design evaluations, and you can track issues and do reporting and so forth. And also, you have a tool that you're using. Make sure that your third party also can have access, so you don't become the bottleneck when you're trying to actually do remediation and implementation. And of course, we all know that if you don't, nothing gets done if it's not measured. Nothing gets funded if it's not measured. And so, in as much as possible, to do recurring benchmarking, maturity modeling, to really track and manage and demonstrate the progress that you're making around your accessibility program. So have a way to measure. We've done this now 2 years in a row, and really looking to continue to do this because this helps us prioritize where we need to go next. And of course, with all these processes that you have, you want to make sure that you're including people with disabilities as much as possible. Often large companies can have employee business resource groups, some of which may be around people with disabilities. And this is a good opportunity, I think, where they can be empowered to be able to provide that their perspective, that input into the whole ecosystem of the digital landscape, into the process of building it, digital assets, and so forth. So that was a lot of information. And really, just to summarize what a 101 is, when you're talking to your stakeholders, you're building an accessibility program from scratch, from nothing, you really want to tie to things that, from a business sense, why does this make sense for us when it comes to business? Why does this make sense for us when it comes to security and privacy? And don't forget that disability inclusion is relatable to every human being. Be very clear about your what are we doing this for? And if it's only a certain part of your digital ecosystem, that's fine. But I also would suggest that you keep the big picture in mind for that entire end-to-end digital ecosystem experience within whatever organization that you're working in. And on how are you doing this when it comes to governance? Have a clear, you're able to get a policy, a company-wide policy in place, that would be great, but don't just create a policy and walk away. Don't just throw it over the wall and walk away. You need to have a governance structure to implement it, and then have work streams of communication, training, all of which this drives the change and change management across your organization. And really have something that your stakeholders can really very much identify with. And I know that you've often seen the curb cut effect, and that it's essential for some, but useful for all. But this is something that instantly can create relatability, understanding, and empathy with your business stakeholders. So I just got the notification that we're at time. So I'm not sure if there are moments for questions, but I think we are at time.
Thank you, Steve. No, this was fantastic. What we can do for any questions that weren't answered, I think you covered most of them. We have your LinkedIn profile shared on our website, and your slides will be shared as well. So if someone wants to reach out to you directly, is that okay?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Terrific.
Happy to share.
Terrific. And we can drop that link to your LinkedIn in the chat again in just a moment, but we are at now 4:01. So again, Steve, thank you so much. We appreciate you being here and Merck's support as our presenting sponsor. This wraps up our almost last session. We're coming up on our final session in less than 15 minutes. The digital accessibility in your job search, aligning on inclusion, will start at 4:15 Eastern Time, 1:15 Pacific. Digital accessibility isn't just a critical initiative for employers, it's a key advantage for job seekers with and without disabilities. So we'll explore how to apply best accessibility practices, identify inclusive organizations, and ensure your values align with your future workplace. So we'll see you back here in about 15 minutes, and thank you again.